Water is swallowing entire cities across Europe. Streets that carried morning traffic have become raging rivers. Homes that stood for generations are now half submerged, and rescue teams are pulling people from buildings that were never meant to flood. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. Not at this scale. Not this relentlessly. Storm Leonardo has turned the Iberian Peninsula into a disaster zone. What makes this event truly alarming is that meteorologists are still trying to understand why it won't stop. Southern and Western Europe are drowning under a weather system that defies normal patterns. Leonardo has been battering Spain and Portugal for days, bringing torrential rainfall that has overwhelmed rivers, flooded cities, and forced mass evacuations. But Leonardo is not acting alone. It is part of what meteorologists call a storm train, a relentless succession of Atlantic weather systems that have been hammering the region since late January. The numbers tell the story of a crisis spiraling out of control. In Grazalema, southern Spain, more than 700 millimeters of rain has fallen since the storm intensified. To put that in perspective, that is roughly what the entire country normally receives in a year, dumped in a matter of days. Andalusia has evacuated 7,000 people from their homes. Roads are impassable. Schools remain closed. Transport networks have ground to a halt. In Malaga province alone, 150 millimeters fell in just 12 hours. Portugal, still reeling from Storm Kristen, which killed at least 10 people the week before, is facing renewed devastation. More than 200 people have been evacuated as fresh downpours trigger landslides and send rivers over their banks. The town of Alcácer de Sal remains semi-submerged, with water levels reaching 2 meters in some areas. And beyond Europe's borders, the storm's reach extends into North Africa. In Morocco, flash flooding has forced more than 100,000 people from their homes, with the hardest-hit regions experiencing catastrophic overflow from rivers and reservoirs. This is not a typical winter storm. This is something else entirely. What makes Leonardo so unusual is not just its intensity, it refuses to leave. Most weather systems pass through in a day or two. Leonardo has been stalled over the Iberian Peninsula for nearly a week, continuously dumping rain on ground that is already saturated beyond capacity. The atmospheric mechanics at play here are both rare and dangerous. An unusually southward shifted jet stream has allowed Leonardo to intensify and linger over the region. But there is another element at work. The storm has merged with what meteorologists call an atmospheric river, essentially a narrow corridor of concentrated moisture in the atmosphere. This one is carrying tropical moisture all the way from the Caribbean across the Atlantic, continuously feeding Leonardo with fresh rainfall. It is like a conveyor belt of water that will not shut off, and because previous storms, Harry, Ingrid, Joseph, and Kristen, have already saturated the soil and filled rivers to the brim, there is nowhere for this water to go. River systems designed to handle seasonal flooding are simply overwhelmed. Aquifers that normally absorb rainfall are full to capacity. The ground cannot drain fast enough. Spain's January rainfall was 85% above the long-term average, making it the second wettest January of the 21st century. Portugal is facing what officials describe as the worst flood threat along the Tagus River in nearly 3 decades. When meteorological agencies issue their highest-level red alerts, not once but repeatedly, you know the situation has crossed into exceptional territory. Behind the dramatic footage of flooded streets and rescue operations, there is a complex emergency response unfolding across multiple countries. Spain's State Meteorological Agency, AEMET, has maintained red and orange alerts across vast sections of the country. The Portuguese government has declared a state of emergency in 69 municipalities and extended it through mid-February. This is not a precautionary measure. It is recognition that normal governance structures cannot handle what is happening. Portugal has deployed up to 3,000 military personnel along flood-prone river sections, equipped with 42 inflatable boats. Spain has mobilized 10,000 emergency responders across Andalusia alone. This is the scale of response you see during major natural disasters. Evacuations have been particularly dramatic in the mountain village of Grazalema, where 1,500 residents were ordered to leave as water seeped through walls and cascaded down steep, cobbled streets. Regional authorities warned that underground aquifers were full to the brim and could collapse under pent-up pressure, potentially creating sinkholes beneath houses and roads. Satellite imagery shows the atmospheric river as a massive plume of moisture stretching thousands of kilometers. Rainfall accumulation maps reveal concentration zones where 500 to 600 millimeters fell in a single day. Before and after comparisons of towns like Alcácer do Sal show the shocking transformation from functioning communities to flooded disaster zones. The human toll continues to mount. At least 14 deaths have been confirmed across the storm sequence, 13 in Portugal and 1 in Spain. In Malaga province, emergency services recovered a body believed to be a woman who fell into a river while trying to rescue her dog. A man in Portugal's Alentejo region died when his car was swept away by floodwaters. These are not statistics. They are people who made split-second decisions in impossible situations. When disasters unfold slowly, their full impact can be difficult to grasp from a distance. Thousands of families are spending nights away from their homes, uncertain when or if they will be able to return. In Leiria, one of Portugal's hardest-hit municipalities, the mayor described scenes resembling a war zone. Residents went days without electricity, heat, or the ability to cook hot meals. A resident in central Portugal described how he managed to get through 8 days using only a wood-burning stove and a small gas burner for cooking. The surrounding area was left heavily damaged, with fallen and uprooted trees everywhere and roofs ripped off houses. Even so, locals are supporting one another and doing what they can to clear the destruction, despite the ongoing rain. The economic damage is staggering and still being calculated. In Spain's Jaén province, losses to the olive harvest alone are estimated at 200 million euros. Critical infrastructure, roads, bridges, and power lines have sustained damage that will take months to repair. Telecommunications have been knocked out in multiple regions. Some areas went without electricity for more than a week. Portugal's government has halted several major public projects to redeploy resources toward flood protection and damage restoration. That is not a routine administrative adjustment. That is an emergency reallocation of national priorities. Business disruptions, agricultural losses, infrastructure repair, and emergency response costs mean the total economic toll will likely climb into the billions. But perhaps the most difficult burden is psychological. Residents in affected areas have received multiple warnings within a single month to stay home from work and keep children out of school. The constant threat, the repeated disruptions, the knowledge that another storm system is always approaching, it creates a sustained stress that does not appear in damage assessments. Understanding why this is happening requires zooming out to look at larger atmospheric dynamics. Europe's weather is largely governed by the jet stream, a fast-moving ribbon of air high in the atmosphere that steers weather systems across the continent. Normally, the jet stream flows in a relatively predictable west-to-east pattern, but when it shifts position or becomes unusually wavy, it can create persistent weather patterns. Right now, the jet stream has shifted southward in an abnormal configuration, allowing storm systems from the Atlantic to line up and hit the Iberian Peninsula in succession. This storm train phenomenon occurs when conditions in the atmosphere create a conveyor belt of low-pressure systems, each following a similar path. What makes the current situation particularly concerning is the convergence of multiple factors. First, the southward shifted jet stream is creating favorable conditions for storms to develop and intensify. Second, atmospheric rivers, corridors of concentrated moisture, are feeding these systems with enormous amounts of water vapor. Third, sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic remain above average, providing additional energy for storm development. And fourth, and perhaps most crucially, ground conditions cannot absorb any more water. Meteorologists and climate scientists are paying close attention to events like this because they reveal how weather patterns are evolving. Research suggests atmospheric rivers may be carrying more moisture in a warming atmosphere. Storm sequences that used to be rare may be occurring with greater frequency. Portugal's National Meteorological Service noted that Storm Kristin, which hit in late January, may have been the strongest storm on record for the country. That designation was made before Leonardo arrived. When record-breaking events start occurring in rapid succession, it suggests the baseline is shifting. One of the most dangerous misconceptions about flooding is that the threat ends when the rain stops. It does not. River flooding often peaks hours or even days after rainfall has moved on, as water travels downstream through drainage basins. Right now, multiple Portuguese rivers, including the Tagus, Douro, and Sado, remain at critically high levels. Emergency authorities have warned that significant flooding could continue along these waterways as upstream water makes its way to the ocean. The risk of landslides increases in the days following heavy rain. Waterlogged soil loses cohesion and can give way suddenly, especially on slopes that have been destabilized by previous storms. Entire hillsides can collapse without warning. Infrastructure damage creates cascading problems. Downed power lines mean no electricity for pumping stations that would normally help drain flooded areas. Blocked roads prevent emergency services from reaching isolated communities. Damaged telecommunications make it harder to coordinate rescue efforts or issue warnings. And there is another storm already approaching. Storm Marta is forecast to bring additional heavy rain and strong winds to areas that have already been devastated. Spain's meteorological office warned that Saturday would bring renewed severe weather to regions that desperately need time to recover. After a brief easing of conditions on Friday, Storm Marta is expected to hit next, bringing intense rainfall and powerful winds on Saturday to regions that have already suffered severe damage, according to a spokesperson. Recovery from flooding is slow, expensive, and psychologically exhausting. It is not measured in days, it is measured in months, sometimes years. What is happening across southern Europe right now reveals something uncomfortable about our assumptions. Modern infrastructure, emergency systems, and weather forecasting have created a sense that we are prepared for natural disasters. But preparedness assumes events fall within expected parameters. Storm Leonardo, Storm Kristen, and the succession of systems before them are pushing beyond those parameters. 7,000 people were evacuated in one region. 14 people have died across 2 countries. Entire towns are submerged. Military forces have been deployed. Elections were postponed. A government has declared it faces a devastating crisis that will require a long and demanding recovery process. This is happening in wealthy, developed European nations with sophisticated infrastructure and advanced warning systems. And they are still overwhelmed. Scientists who study extreme weather are increasingly interested in understanding not just individual storms, but storm sequences, and how multiple events in rapid succession can create compounding damage that overwhelms response capacity. The storm train affecting Iberia demonstrates exactly this phenomenon. Climate research suggests that as atmospheric moisture content increases, the potential for extreme precipitation events grows with it. Whether any single storm can be attributed to climate change is a complex question. What is less complex is the observation that events previously considered rare are occurring with greater frequency. The people of Portugal and Spain did not ask to become a case study in evolving weather patterns. They are simply trying to protect their homes, keep their families safe, and rebuild what has been destroyed. But their experience raises questions that extend far beyond the Iberian Peninsula. If infrastructure designed for historic weather patterns cannot handle what is happening now, what happens when exceptional becomes normal? If emergency services are maxed out responding to one crisis while another approaches, how do we build resilience? And if the spaces between disasters keep shrinking, when does recovery become impossible? These are not abstract policy questions. They are playing out in real time in flooded Spanish villages and Portuguese towns, cut off from electricity for weeks. Do you think events like this will become more common? Or are we only beginning to understand what is changing? Subscribe for more in-depth analysis of extreme weather events around the world, and stay safe.